Let's have a look at this Brazil thing. How much did you see about this this Brazil Twitter files thing, Motch?
I have seen absolutely none of this, so you can explain it to me like I'm 5.
All right. Well, you're not quite 5. Luckily, I mean, I'm not. Chat could accuse me of a lot, but they can't go quite that far. Twitter files Brazil. Brazil is engaged in a sweeping crackdown on free speech led by a Supreme Court justice named Alexandre de Moraes. This is from Michael Schellenberger. Schellenberger, if you recall, is the guy who leaked a large portion, in fact, I think he was the main leaker, of the Twitter files US, or the Twitter files Anglosphere, either way. The main one, when Elon took control of the platform, he was the main source of the leaks for that. He's leftist, but other than that, it doesn't make him wrong, and he actually seems quite reasonable. And he is now continuing the good work that he's one of the few journalists left, continuing the good work that he's doing in revealing what's going on in Brazil. Now, we found that with the Twitter file stuff that he revealed, we didn't find any reason to think that what he said was wrong. So I'm willing to give him a lot of trust here. With these as well. So I'm going to read what he says verbatim. Bear in mind, it might not be 100% true, but I expect it's probably true. De Moraes has thrown people in jail without trial for things they posted on social media. He has demanded the removal of users from social media platforms, and he has required the censorship of specific posts without giving users any right of appeal or even the right to see the evidence presented against them. Hello, Dai. This is always interesting how so many places are trying to implement laws on free speech all at around the same time. Nothing sinister there, I'm sure. Actually, I think you might be mistaken. I think there's quite a lot sinister there. Yes, I think that there is some coordination. And the victories, therefore, are also not coincidental. And El Salvador is a good example, and there have been a few other minor or regional victories over time. Some undone as well, but we're getting there. And the Argentina seems to be a victory. So we're getting there. Now, Twitter files released here for the first time reveal that de Moraes and the superior electoral court he controls engaged in a clear attempt to undermine democracy in Brazil. They illegally demanded that Twitter reveal personal details about Twitter users who used hashtags he did not like, demanded access to Twitter's internal data in violation of Twitter policy, sought to censor unilaterally Twitter posts by sitting members of Brazil's Congress, sought to weaponize Twitter's content moderation policies against supporters of then-President Jair Bolsonaro. Not sure how to pronounce that. The files show the origins of the Brazilian judiciary's demand for sweeping censorship powers, the court's use of censorship for anti-democratic election interference, and the birth of the censorship industrial complex in Brazil. Twitter files was written by David Agape, L.A. Vera Jr., and Schellenberger. I think all three of those were involved in the original leaks. I'm not certain the other two were, but I know Schellenberger was. They say, we presented these findings to de Moraes, to the Supreme Court, and to the High Electoral Court. None responded. There's more to do on the Brazil thing. Brazil has been making demands of Twitter to basically do all the same things that the US feds were doing to Twitter, but more. So to censor specific people, censor anyone that liked certain hashtags.
Oh, I think I did hear of this.
Demanding Twitter's data, all this stuff. And the remarkable thing about all this, which I didn't say earlier while I was explaining this, is that unlike every other social media platform, and unlike every other time in Twitter's own history, Elon has said no.
I saw his tweet on this, based Elon. Yeah, that's why I remember this.
So let's continue with this thread, though. Schellenberger says, we are pushing back against the requests. On February 14th, 2020, Twitter's legal counsel in Brazil, Rafael Batista, emailed his colleagues to describe a hearing in Congress on disinformation and fake news. Batista revealed that members of Brazil's Congress had asked, oh God, there's so much here, had asked Twitter for the content of messages exchanged by some users via DMs, as well as login records, among other info. Batista says, we are pushing back against the requests, which were illegal because they do not meet Brazilian internet law, Marco civil legal requirements for disclosure of users' records. Batista noted that some conservative Twitter users had gone to the Supreme Court after they learned from the media that the Congress was trying to get their IPs and DM content. In light of this, the Supreme Court granted an injunction suspending the requirement given its failure to fulfill legal requirements. Not sure what that means exactly, but let's continue. Brazil's Supreme Court...
They didn't comply.
Superior Electoral Court. 7 justices comprise Brazil's Superior Electoral Court. 3 of those justices are also members of the Supreme Court. One of them, Alexandre de Moraes, presides over the TSE. His background, which is the Superior Electoral Court, background on the rise of Brazil's censorship industrial complex. Google, Facebook, Uber, WhatsApp, and Instagram provide registration data and phone numbers without court order. So just
scum of the earth. Gotcha.
Just assholes open wide for this. On January 27th, 2021, Batista emailed his colleagues about a police investigation against him for refusing to give personal Twitter user data to the Sao Paulo State Public Prosecutor Office. The prosecutor claimed that Twitter's attitude is isolated because all the other big technology companies such as Google, Facebook, Uber, WhatsApp, and Instagram provide registration data and phone numbers without a court order. But Twitter has not affirmative obligation to collect registration data, explained Batista to the prosecutor, and there is no phone number associated with the account under investigation. Well, revealing that is arguably a violation of privacy in the first place. But God, look how many replies deep this is.
Dude, I just love how they're like, well, everyone else gave us thing even without a court order. Why aren't you doing the same thing, huh?
There's once again,
if all the others comply, we can. If everyone else complies, we can force you.
It's like the old image of you can stand against a crowd of thousands and say you are all wrong and you can be right.
I'm just waiting for the EU to be like, we're going to just block Twitter in all EU.
They might do. They might do. They might do.
I'm waiting.
Well, if that happens, I will try and figure out a UK VPN for you.
I have a VPN.
Okay. Quote, this is the first time an actual criminal investigation was filed against an employee. I'm not sure what the context of that is. On February 18th, 2021, Batista emailed his colleagues again to report back on his deposition. He said he told the prosecutor that Twitter operates in Brazil since 2012, and this is the first time an actual criminal investigation was filed against an employee for alleged non-compliance either with a request for or a court order. Batista said he pointed out that there is no affirmative obligation in the country for collection and consequently provision of registration data. The thing I was reading before from Schellenberger, there's a lot of detail here. It's quite dry. I'm not going to continue reading it. I will link it though. It's interesting stuff, but there's a lot of sort of procedural connection making here in the writing that is dry and difficult to get through. So I'm going to skip past it a bit. I have this though, Elon's take. One of the things Elon said, and chat, I think there is some other place where Elon gave a more full-on opinion on this, but this is something that he said on it.
From this Judge Alexander, that's his name on Twitter, at Alexander, and there would be to suspend accounts. Immediately, we're given typically 2 hours to suspend an account or face massive fines. And the final straw is we were being given demands to suspend sitting members of the parliament and major journalists. And moreover, we could.
So it's not just dissident civilians, it's officials as well. So it's more than just the inaction of social media tyranny. It seems more like a full-on power grab of one part of government over the others.
Not tell them that this was at the behest of Alexander Morales. We had to pretend that it was due to our rules of service.
Yeah, so Brazil was also requiring them to lie. Now, part of what I want to talk about here is just how much power nations have over companies like this. Because in the globalized reality we live in now, the globalized economy and cultures we live in now, there's many issues, many problems that come along with that, with some corporations being more powerful than some nations, and that really breaking down the expectations inside those nations, and conglomerations of corporate interests breaking down the nation assumptions of every nation, what the WEF is and others. One of the many complications that comes along with is that when a corporation wants to operate internationally, every single nation can, to some extent, affect their general policy, and much more so, every single nation can significantly affect that company's policy in that country. Now, in some cases, this is fine. if there are genuinely different but not invalid standards between two different countries, then sure, a corporation could support both of them. And that's sort of just like localization. Lots of other things that aren't legal localization, but would be cultural localization. It's a good idea. But if a government is asking a corporation to do unethical things, then the corporation's in a really tough position there, because if they do the ethical thing, they lose loads of money. They're probably going to be kicked out of that country. And then a replacement is going to be brought in either by that tyrannical government or by some other corporation who's more willing to cuck. The government of that country is then likely to use propaganda to convince people that it was Twitter's idea or Twitter's fault, in this case, Twitter. So it's a tough one. I can understand why corporations like Twitter would sometimes do what nations demanded, especially nations like Germany, which is like the 3rd or 4th biggest economy in the world, but even Brazil, which is probably about 15th. So it's tough. And Elon saying no is actually massive. It's very brave. It's a lot braver than it seems. Because by doing this, he will probably lose his entire access to Brazil as a market. Now, it's a game of chicken. Will they, won't they? But they might do. There's a pretty good chance they will, at some point in the near future, just make Twitter illegal.
Do we know how many people in Brazil use Twitter currently?
I don't know, but I expect, like in most countries, it's the microblogging platform of the country. The only exception really to that is China.
Yeah, because I feel like, again, doing this will. Most people aren't going to be. The more they start trying to ban stuff or like remove them from like certain countries, like the actual people that use these sites are going to get more and more and more frustrated.
Yes. That's why the government might be reluctant to do this, but as I said, they can control that with propaganda and mislead people. So it might not come back to them too hard.
Well, yeah, but at some point, once somebody goes on, once you go from being able to just open up your thing, search Twitter, and then when you go to it, it's like, oh, this is blocked in your country. Like once you see that in front of you, it's like, well, why the fuck is this blocked? Why, why can't we see what's on it? It's like, it's just pure control, is what it is.
I agree. The people may take that as a point for more dissent, and they probably will. So that is the reason the government would be reluctant, but ultimately, they very well might. And I mean, a government which is told no and then does nothing about it is going to look weaker. So it might ultimately be better for them to kick Twitter out, even for the dissent that they get in return. So it's a tough one. And given that Elon has been struggling to make Twitter profitable, this is very brave from him to do this. So like it's sort of a white pilling moment that
I really like
think
Elon.
what you want
like,
about
at
Elon,
least,
but yeah, he's doing a lot of actually pretty good things.
Well, just going on Twitter and seeing what, like, since he's bought it, like, or I see a lot more people calling each other without immediately getting banned. It's nice to see. But there is also some times where, like, I post stuff and then my 3 or 4 times it's happened now where I've called out, like, calling these, what they are or whatever on there, and like I posted and immediately my reply gets hidden because they're like, this violates our community guidelines, and then
they do still do that.
I appeal it though, and every time I've appealed it, I'm like, I'm just like, it's what was it? They use cis as a slur, saying like talking back to them isn't hate or whatever is my thing, and every time they've just reinstated my message.
Okay, so that's good. I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah, every time I've appealed for it, they've been like, yeah, no, this didn't actually. I think it's just an automated thing where they're picking up on certain words.
As Phil says, it might be mass flagging that needs mass flagged you.
Yeah.
Also,
always appeal it. Always appeal it, because I've noticed every time I've appealed it, they've just gotten rid of it. So.
So just like most of the modern right, particularly the slightly more parochial modern right, Twitter is also weird about like defending Jews more than anything else. But so there are a few topics where they still do censor more than I'd like, but it's so much better than it was. And they've released many people onto the platform, Alex Jones included, and Trump, of course, who weren't there before. And all the Twitter file stuff revealed a lot about how our enemies work, and now this as well. Like, it's undeniable that Elon is doing good work.